Hello, the topic of discussion today is shoulder dystocia. This is a very important topic as every year one or two questions are asked from this guideline. So without further ado, let's get started. Shoulder dystocia. The incidence of shoulder dystocia is 0.58 to 0.70%. This is a frequently asked question. Incidence of shoulder dystocia is 0.58 to 0.70%. So when we talk about shoulder dystocia, we should know what is the definition of shoulder dystocia. Vaginal cephalic delivery. So this is a vaginal cephalic delivery which requires additional obstetric maneuver. So every point is important here. It is the additional obstetric maneuver to deliver the fetus after the head has delivered and genital traction has failed. So it is usually the axial traction which is applied. Okay, so axial traction which is along the fetal spine, along the direction of fetal spine, when a gentle axial traction has failed and after the delivery of head, the body fails to deliver within a time limit of 1 minute. So again, a very frequently asked question, a time limit of 1 minute. So once the head is delivered, the body should deliver within 1 minute, that is 60 seconds. If that fails to happen, it is called as shoulder dystocia. So shoulder dystocia is an obstetrician's nightmare. This is an obstetric emergency. Now why are we discussing shoulder dystocias in such depth? There are certain complications associated with shoulder dystocia. There are maternal complications and there are fetal complications. In fact, shoulder dystocia is an obstetrician's nightmare. So I've tried to summarize it in tabular form so that it is easier for you to remember. Maternal complication includes PPH. Very frequently asked question. PPH is seen in 11% cases of shoulder dystocia. So the incidence of PPH in shoulder dystocia is 11%. Another maternal complication is association with third and fourth degree perineal tear. 3 to 8%. Okay, so third and fourth degree perineal tears are seen in 3.8% cases of shoulder dystocia. Now when we come to the fetal complications, there is this brachial plexus injury. Brachial plexus injury is seen in 2.3 to 16% cases of shoulder dystocia. In fact, you should know that brachial plexus injury is the most common cause of litigation. It is the most common cause of litigation in shoulder dystocia. Very important. Brachial plexus injury is the most common cause of litigation in shoulder dystocia, and it is also the third most common overall litigated obstetric cause. Okay, so in obstetrics, brachial plexus injury is the third most common cause of litigation, and in shoulder dystocia it is the most common cause, most common reason of litigation, which is why it is very important for us to know about this complication. Second is the permanent neurological dysfunction. Permanent neurological dysfunction is seen in less than 10% cases of shoulder dystocia. Now, since brachial plexus injury is associated with litigation, it is a very severe complication of shoulder dystocia. We should read about it in detail. Brachial plexus injury, 46% of it is related to substandard care. Okay, when you don't know how to manage shoulder dystocia, you may land up injuring the baby, causing brachial plexus injury. So 46% occurs due to substandard care. 4% is seen even after cesarean section. If you don't deliver the baby nicely, then it can lead to brachial plexus injury. 4% are related to cesarean section, and 12% brachial plexus injury is associated with uncomplicated cesarean section. When you feel that the cesarean was all fine, it was not complicated, but you were very harsh with delivering the baby, then also it can lead to brachial plexus injury. And without stressing much on this, all of these figures are important. Okay, now when it is associated with litigation, there are certain things we should know. See, you should understand why brachial plexus injury occurs in the first place. If the baby is delivering, the head has delivered, the body has not yet delivered, the shoulders are fixed at the level of pubic symphysis. If you try to deliver the baby putting the downward traction, if you put the downward traction, then there can be avulsion. As you can see here, there can be avulsion here, okay, at the level of brachial plexus. So if you're delivering anterior shoulder and with a downward traction, which should never be given, downward traction should never be given, it should only be the axial traction which should be given in case of shoulder dystocia, that can lead to brachial plexus injury. So documentation is very important, because to save with litigation, you should know which shoulder is affected. See if the affected shoulder is anterior or posterior, because injury to posterior shoulder is less likely due to the action by healthcare worker. So if you have documented everything well and the injury is not to the anterior shoulder but the posterior shoulder, then it is less likely due to the deficiency or the fault of healthcare worker. Now let us try to solve certain questions. A primipara has shoulder dystocia requiring delivery of posterior arm to deliver the baby. What is the approximate chance of having a permanent brachial plexus injury from shoulder dystocia? So look at this. It is the permanent brachial plexus injury or permanent neurological dysfunction. We just discussed that permanent neurological dysfunction is associated with shoulder dystocia, is associated with permanent neurological dysfunction in less than 10% cases. In less than 10% cases. So they have tried to modify it in a certain way. 1 in how many cases? So if you do little math, 10 by 100 is equal to 1 by 1000. It is 1 in 1000, right? So it is less than 1 in 1000. What is less than 1 in 1000? It is 1 in 10,000. So anything that is less than 1 in 1000, that will be your answer. Now let us look at the risk factors of shoulder dystocia. If you anticipate a problem first, it is easier to handle. There are certain risk factors associated with shoulder dystocia. I have again put it in tabular form so that it is easier for you to remember. There are pre-labor risk factors. If a patient is coming to you during antenatal period and you anticipate that this patient may land up in shoulder dystocia, those are the pre-labor risk factors. And a very, very important one is previous history of shoulder dystocia. Now it is important, it has a very practical standpoint. If a patient comes to you, she is pregnant, she comes to you in her first trimester and she tells you that she had a history of shoulder dystocia in her previous pregnancy, and she asks you, doctor, what are the risks of having shoulder dystocia again in this pregnancy? Now what do you tell her? You tell her that a previous history of shoulder dystocia has 10 times risk. Okay, the risk is 10 times. Very commonly asked question. Previous history of shoulder dystocia, risk of recurrence is 10 times. In terms of percentage, the recurrence risk is 1 to 25%. So they ask this question very frequently, 10 times. The risk of shoulder dystocia in subsequent pregnancies is 10 times. Now again, if there is macrosomia, if the baby is large for gestational age, macrosomia more than 4.5 kg baby weight is associated with shoulder dystocia. With that being said, infant of diabetic mother, it carries a higher risk. And you should also know that 48% of shoulder dystocia occurs in baby weight less than 4 kg. Okay. Although more than 4.5 kg is a risk factor, but 48% of shoulder dystocia, almost the half, occurs when the baby weight is less than 4 kg. So you have to be vigilant in every vaginal delivery. Secondly, infant of diabetic mother carries 2 to 4-fold risk. Very frequently asked question. Infant of diabetic mother carries 2 to 4-fold risk. Why is that so? Because in diabetes, the baby has fat deposition in shoulder. So there are higher risk of shoulder dystocia if a baby is born to a mother who's diabetic, gestational diabetes or overt diabetes. Again, diabetes mellitus is definitely a risk factor because of the same reason. BMI of mother, if more than 30 kg per meter square, BMI is again a risk factor. And induction of labor, if the patient is not going in spontaneous labor, if you're inducing the patient, then it is an independent risk factor. Now, there are certain intrapartum risk factors. If it is a difficult delivery, prolonged first stage, prolonged second stage of labor, secondary arrest, use of oxytocin, injudicious use of oxytocin is a risk factor. Then assisted vaginal delivery. Assisted vaginal delivery includes forceps and ventouse delivery. This is associated with 10 times risk. Okay, the risk is 10 times when it is a assisted vaginal delivery or operative vaginal delivery. Now moving on, best variables to predict shoulder dystocia include maternal height and weight, gestational age, parity and birth weight. Then there are certain prediction factors also. So they have made some prediction models, but it is important for you to know that prediction models are not reliable. They have asked this as well in questions before. So prediction models, although are there to help us predict shoulder dystocia, but these are not reliable. The score of more than 0.5 predicted only 50% of shoulder dystocia. Birth weight estimation has 60% sensitivity for macrosomia. So even if you predict birth weight, it has only 60% predictability for macrosomia. These figures are mentioned in the guidelines, although they have not asked this very frequently. They have not asked this before, but you should know this can be asked in future. Now moving on to the next subtopic. How to prevent shoulder dystocia. If we can prevent shoulder dystocia, it is the best management for shoulder dystocia. There is a role of induction of labor. If you know that macrosomia is associated with shoulder dystocia, then if you see macrosomia developing, you should induce the patient, right? IOL does not prevent shoulder dystocia. It does not prevent shoulder dystocia in low risk population, that is in non-diabetics with suspected macrosomia. You will not go around inducing every patient. If you feel that the patient has larger baby size, you will not induce every patient, right? So the patients who are not diabetic, in which there is just suspected macrosomia, their induction of labor is not advisable. It is not recommended. Then secondly, induction of labor, however, can reduce the risk of shoulder dystocia in diabetics. So role of induction of labor to prevent shoulder dystocia is only limited to diabetic. Now this table is very important. I have summarized certain do's and don'ts to prevent shoulder dystocia. What are the do's? What should you do to prevent shoulder dystocia? See, first of all, GDM is definitely a risk factor. In case of diabetes, a normally grown fetus should be offered induction at 38 weeks. Why is that so? Even a normally grown fetus can land up in shoulder dystocia once the maturity has attained, because again, the fat is mainly deposited in the shoulder as compared to non-diabetic infants. So GDM, normally grown fetus, induction of labor at 38 weeks. But it is very important for you to know that elective cesarean section, there is an indication for elective cesarean section in patients who are diabetic, overt or GDM, with estimated fetal weight of more than 4.5 kg. So there are two factors playing here. First, the patient is diabetic. Second, there is macrosomia, more than 4.5 kg baby weight. So in this case, you will offer cesarean section. There is no doubt about it. Very frequently asked question. Third, what should you do? You should give routine axial traction along the fetal spine. Okay, so if this is maternal pelvis and the baby is delivering, this is the baby, these are the shoulders, and this is head. Okay, so in case of shoulder dystocia, the head, the shoulders are stuck here. Okay, so you can only give axial traction, you can only pull here. You should not give an upward pull or a downward pull. It should always only be axial traction. What should not be done? Ultrasound estimation for suspected LGA, large for gestational age baby, is not done. Okay, you will not check with repeated ultrasounds to see if there is macrosomia developing. Previous history of shoulder dystocia. You know that previous history of shoulder dystocia is associated with 10 times risk of shoulder dystocia in subsequent pregnancy. So does that mean you offer cesarean section to every female who has had previous shoulder dystocia? No. You just counsel the patient. So elective section is, routine elective section is not recommended, but definitely the case should be discussed with the family. Third is lateral and downward traction. As I told you, lateral and downward traction should not be given. It should only be the axial traction that should be given. Then again, downward traction should also not be given. As I told you before, if you give a downward traction, the anterior shoulder and the neck, they are stretched. This can lead to brachial plexus injury. Now next is prophylactic McRoberts. In McRoberts maneuver, the thighs are flexed over maternal chest. This is done as a management of shoulder dystocia once shoulder dystocia has already occurred. So this is the treatment, the management of shoulder dystocia. It is not a prophylactic or a preventive measure. So if you feel that the patient can develop shoulder dystocia, you will not put her in McRoberts maneuver before the delivery of head. So a prophylactic McRoberts maneuver should not be done, okay, before the delivery of fetal head. No. Third, last one is fundal pressure. Should never be used. Never give fundal pressure. Never fundal. Okay. Never give fundal pressure in the management of shoulder dystocia. Why? Because it can worsen shoulder dystocia. The baby will get stuck even more, and it can also lead to uterine rupture. So these are few do's and don'ts in the management of shoulder dystocia. Now, how do you diagnose shoulder dystocia? Once the shoulder dystocia has occurred, you have to act very quick. So first is the diagnosis of shoulder dystocia. How do you diagnose it? There is difficulty in delivering rest of the body, right, after the delivery of head. So difficulty in delivering chin and face. Next, the head is tightly placed on the vulva and it is seen retracting, right? This is also called as turtle neck sign. Turtle neck sign is seen in shoulder dystocia. Third, there is failure of restitution. If you understand mechanism of labor, you should know that restitution occurs due to movement of shoulders, right? So once the head is delivered, the shoulder, they try to take an oblique angle so that they can also deliver. And this oblique angle, when they try to take, that leads to restitution. When the head is seen moving towards the maternal thigh, that fails to happen, okay, because the shoulders are stuck. So failure of restitution. Then last, of course, failure of shoulders to descend. This is how you diagnose shoulder dystocia. Now the management of shoulder dystocia. A lot of questions are asked from this topic. First is call for help. First management. First, it is the drill that every staff follows. There is an annual drill. First, you call for help. Call the senior most person who is present on floor and ask the patient not to push. Discourage pushing. So call for help and discourage pushing, right? Next, what do? The first maneuver that you do is McRoberts maneuver. It is also the first maneuver in shoulder dystocia, and this is also associated. It is also associated with success rate. This has success rate of 90%. So if you act quickly and you put the patient in McRoberts maneuver, that is, you put thighs to abdomen, flex and abduct. So there is flexion and abduction of thigh. So the thigh are placed directly on the chest, they are flexed and abducted. This is called as McRoberts maneuver. Next, once the McRoberts maneuver fails, the next maneuver is suprapubic pressure. So this is how it helps. If you give suprapubic pressure, you are trying to push the anterior shoulder and move it. So there is a downward and lateral traction. Okay, it is a downward and lateral traction on the anterior shoulder in the suprapubic space to in an attempt to dislodge the anterior shoulder. Suprapubic pressure along with the routine axial traction. So what you give from outside is no lateral or downward traction. It is the axial traction, and suprapubically you try to push the anterior shoulder downward and laterally. So this suprapubic pressure is given downward and lateral. Okay, downward and lateral with routine axial traction, right? This is the next maneuver. Then if you have not given episiotomy yet, give episiotomy. Episiotomy will not help with the management of shoulder dystocia, but it will make it easier for you to do the maneuvers, because next step can be internal maneuver, where you will have to put your hand inside the vagina. When you do any maneuver after suprapubic pressure, you are trying to deliver the posterior arm. You also try to do the internal rotation. So now is the time to call the senior most person. You call consultant obstetrician, you call consultant anesthetist, because the internal maneuvers are associated with a lot of pain and contraction, and this may require anesthesia. Now if all the above fail, then next maneuver is all four. So this is how you put the patient in all fours if possible. You can see that it can be a little difficult for heavier patients, for bulky patients. So it is only possible in slim patients. If it is not possible, then you repeat all the previously done maneuvers again. So this all four is also called as Gaskin's maneuver, and it has a success rate of 83%, which is quite high. But you should know it can be done only with slim and mobile patients and without epidural anesthesia. Now, if everything has failed, after this you may consider certain invasive procedures, which includes sclerotomy, that is cutting up of the clavicle. You try to cut the clavicle of the baby, that is called as sclerotomy. Symphysiotomy, that is you cut the pubic symphysis. And then there is also something called as Zavanelli's restitution. What is this? Put the baby inside and move on to cesarean section. You need to document everything. There is a documentation chart specifically made for shoulder dystocia, where you have to document everything, because it is associated with high rate of mortality. 47% die within 5 minutes. So you have to do all the maneuvers within 5 minutes, deliver the baby within 5 minutes. So this is again a small flow chart. Call for help. Then first maneuver is McRoberts maneuver. Then you move on to suprapubic pressure along with the axial traction. Then you try to deliver posterior arm. Call the senior most people. Try to go on with all fours if that is possible. Then there are internal maneuvers that you can do, right? Here you can see the patient is lying flat. So while you're doing McRoberts maneuver, remove the pillow and the patient should be lying flat over the surface. Now, McRoberts maneuver, what is the rationale of doing these maneuvers? McRoberts maneuver, it straightens the lumbosacral angle. Okay, when the patient flexes and abducts her thigh, it straightens the lumbosacral maneuver. This also tilts the maternal pelvis towards mother's head, so that it increases the relative AP diameter, so that the shoulders have enough space to move to the oblique angle. Lay flat, remove pillows. This we have already discussed. Suprapubic pressure is downward and lateral. It reduces the bisacromial diameter. If you are trying to push the anterior shoulder, the baby will try to curl a little bit, right? So this will reduce the bisacromial diameter. It rotates the anterior shoulder obviously to the oblique angle, which is our aim. You should know that episiotomy does not reduce the risk of brachial plexus injury. In case of shoulder dystocia, episiotomy has one and only one role, that is to gain access, so that it is easier for you to do all the maneuvers. Now, if McRoberts maneuver fail, if you are going for internal maneuvers, you should let your hand enter the vagina through the most available portion, most roomy portion, that is sacral hollow. Okay, don't go laterally through the pelvis, don't go upside, you move through the sacral hollow. Now you should make sure that the entire hand enters, which is why you have to give episiotomy in this case. Try to move the baby in oblique or 180 degrees. So these are the internal maneuvers. Now we are moving on to Rubens and corkscrew maneuver. So internal maneuvers are Wood's corkscrew and Rubens maneuver, right? Our idea is basically to deliver posterior arm. Okay, it is easy to deliver posterior arm by holding the wrist. So you flex the elbow, hold the wrist and deliver the posterior arm. The problem is that this is associated with humerus fracture in 2 to 12% cases. Okay, now let us try to solve certain questions. A primigravida with gestational diabetes mellitus presented in active labor and progressed to full dilatation after 7 hours. She remained fully dilated for for 2 hours, after which she started pushing. The head was delivered but was noticed to be receding. So now you know that this is shoulder dystocia. You were called and arrived in 2 minutes. What would be the next step in management? So first step has already occurred, call for help. Now you come here and then now you have to manage what will be your first step. So apply suprapubic pressure, insert your hand in the vagina and deliver posterior arm, perform an episiotomy and attempt to deliver the shoulders, place her in McRoberts position. The answer is place her in McRoberts position. That is the first maneuver in shoulder dystocia. Next question. In shoulder dystocia, following maneuver is known as flexion and abduction of the maternal hips with pressure behind the anterior shoulder downward and laterally. Is it McRoberts? Is it reverse corkscrew, Rubin 2, suprapubic pressure, or wood screw maneuver? What is it? The answer is suprapubic pressure. Okay, so don't get confused in option A and D. If they had just mentioned till here, it would have been McRoberts maneuver, where you just flex the hips and put the patient in that position. That is McRoberts. But once you give suprapubic pressure in an attempt to dislodge the shoulder, you move downward and lateral, that becomes suprapubic pressure. Okay, this suprapubic pressure, this maneuver is also called as Rubin 1 maneuver. Okay, when they specify Rubin, they don't say anything, they just say Rubin's maneuver. It means the internal maneuver that we will discuss shortly. But suprapubic pressure is also called as Rubin's 1 maneuver. Here the answer is suprapubic pressure. Now next question. In shoulder dystocia, following maneuver is known as flexion of the head with pressure superiorly until the fetal head is back in the vagina and then deliver by cesarean section. We've already discussed this. When you try to put the head back in the vagina and try to deliver the baby in via cesarean section, it is called as Zavanelli's restitution. Next question. What is the true statement regarding shoulder dystocia? Majority of shoulder dystocias cannot be predicted. 48% of shoulder dystocia are seen with less than 4 kg, which is why predictive models are not reliable. Ultrasound, we have not read about the role of ultrasound in the entire guideline. So ultrasound is not a reliable tool. Why is D not the answer? All women who have had shoulder dystocia should be counseled. They should be told about the risk, that is 10 times. Okay, the risk of having shoulder dystocia in subsequent pregnancy is 10 times. But this does not mean that every such patient should go for elective cesarean. E, the risk, again, it is not 4 times, it is 10 times. Okay, and this we have already read. In case of forceps and ventouse, especially in mid-cavity forceps, the risk of developing shoulder dystocia is 10 times. Next question. You undertake an instrumental delivery on 30-year-old primary para for prolonged second stage. You notice the turtle sign and diagnose shoulder dystocia. With the next contraction, you are able to deliver the shoulders. What maneuver is where you insert your fingers posterior to the anterior shoulder of the baby? Although they have not discussed the internal maneuvers in the guidelines, they still ask questions from the internal maneuvers. The answer here is Rubin 2. Okay, and we'll discuss what are these internal maneuvers. So in case of the internal maneuvers, first there is Rubin 2, in which you place your hand inside and, as shown in the picture, put 2 fingers on the posterior aspect of the anterior shoulder and try to move it. Try to move it in an attempt to push it to side so that the shoulders attain oblique diameter. This is called as Rubin's 2. So whenever they ask in question, they will always ask fingers put posterior aspect of anterior shoulder. This is called as Rubin's 2. Whenever they mention posterior shoulder instead of anterior, okay, if the question mentions posterior shoulder, when it is done, the same maneuver, when it is done in posterior shoulder, it is called as reverse wood screw maneuver. Okay. Next is wood corkscrew. You try to move the baby in the oblique and then 180 degree. So posterior shoulder is rotated and counterclockwise until it becomes the anterior shoulder. Because you are rotating it like this, therefore it is called as corkscrew, wood corkscrew maneuver. right? So reverse wood screw, we know, we've already discussed, whenever posterior shoulder is mentioned, it is reverse corkscrew. Next question, a 25-year-old healthy woman has a normal labor and a spontaneous delivery of fetal head. On expulsion of fetal head, the head remains tightly applied to the vulva. So this is shoulder dystocia. A midwife activated the emergency buzzer and declared that there is shoulder dystocia. You attended immediately. How will you confirm your diagnosis? A. Ask the woman to push. B. Change the position of woman to all four. C. Do a mild traction in an axial action to confirm the diagnosis. Do a mild traction in different directions. E. Inform the consultant. By now you should be able to answer this question, and this was asked before in exam. The answer is do a mild traction in an axial direction. You will definitely not ask the patient to push, because you should discourage pushing. That is the first step once you have diagnosed shoulder dystocia. Then inform the consultant. First you do all these things, no? First you try Mick Roberts, first you try suprapubic, and then if all of this fails, then you call your consultant. So here we finish this topic, shoulder dystocia.